21. Preceptor and spiritual guide. The preceptors are also of two types, general and special. The general preceptor is he who is not responsible for guiding any particular individual. People seek his guidance considering him to be a learned and experienced man. The Quran says, "Ask those who know if you do not know." Such preceptors can be helpful only in the beginning of spiritual journey. When the spiritual traveler begins to view the manifestations of the glory of essence and attributes of Allah, he no longer needs to have a general preceptor. The special preceptor is he about whom a divine ordinance exists, to the effect that he has been assigned the job of guidance. This position is held only by the Holy Prophet and his rightful successors. Their guidance and company are essential and indispensable not only at every stage of spiritual journey, but even after the spiritual traveler has reached his destination. The nature of this company is esoteric, not physical, for the real nature of the Imam is that station of his luminosity, the authority of which extends to everyone and everything in the world. Although Imam's body is also superior to the body of everyone else, yet the source of his authority over the universe is not his body. To explain this point, it may be mentioned that whatever happens in this world, its source is the names and attributes of Allah, and the same divine names and attributes are the essence of the Imam also. That is why the Imams have said, "Allah is known through us, and He is worshipped through us." Therefore, it may rightly be said that whatever stages the spiritual traveler traverses, he covers them in the light of the Imam, and every position to which he advances, that position is controlled by the Imam. Throughout his journey, the spiritual traveler enjoys the company of the Imam and remains associated with him. Even after reaching his destination, he needs the company of the Imam, for it is the Imam who teaches him the rules that are to be observed in the world of divinity. Therefore, Imam's company is essential at every stage of spiritual journey. In this connection, there are many subtle points which are not easy to be explained. They may be discovered by the spiritual traveler through his own taste. Once, Muhyiddin ibn Arabi went to a spiritual guide and complained to him that injustice was growing and the sins were rampant. The spiritual guide advised him to pay attention to Allah. A few days later, he went to another spiritual guide and made the same complaint. That spiritual guide told him to pay attention to himself. Ibn Arabi was very much upset and began to weep. He asked the spiritual guide why the two answers were so different from each other. The spiritual guide said, "Oh dear, the answer is one and the same. He drew your attention to the companion and I to the path." I have related this story to show that there is no difference between making a journey to Allah on the one hand and arriving at the station of the Imam, while passing through the stages of the divine names and attributes on the other. These two things are not only closer to each other, but are almost identical. At this stage, there is no conception of duality. There is nothing but the light of the glory of one single being, which is described in different words. Sometimes it is expressed as the divine names and attributes, and sometimes as the essence of the Imam or his luminosity. To know whether a general preceptor is fit to be so, it is necessary to watch him closely and have contact with him for a considerable time. Such supernatural things as to know what others think, to walk on fire or water, to narrate the past events, or to foretell the future, are not a sign of anybody's being a favorite of Allah. The performance of such things becomes possible at the beginning of spiritual vision, but the stage of proximity to Allah is far away from this stage. No one can be a preceptor in the true sense unless and until he receives the light of the glory of divine essence. To receive the light of the manifestations of divine names and attributes is not enough. The spiritual traveler is said to be receiving the light of the manifestations of the divine attributes when he feels that his knowledge, power, and life are really the knowledge, power, and life of Allah. At this stage, when the spiritual traveler hears something, he feels that Allah has heard it, and when he sees something, he feels that Allah has seen it. He may feel that Allah alone is the knower, and the knowledge of every existing being is the knowledge of Allah Himself. The spiritual traveler is said to be receiving the light of the glory of the divine names when he views the divine attributes in himself. For example, he feels that Allah is the only knower, and his knowledge is also that of Allah. Or he feels that the only living being is Allah, and that he himself is not living, but his life is actually that of Allah. In other words, he intuitively feels that there is no knowing, living, or powerful being except Allah. If a spiritual traveler receives the light of the manifestations of one or two divine names, it is not necessary that he should receive the light of the manifestations of other divine names also. The spiritual traveler receives the light of the glory of divine essence only when he forgets himself totally and can find no trace of himself or his ego. There is none but Allah. Such a person can never go astray, nor can be seduced by Satan. Satan does not lose hope of alluring a spiritual traveler until he obliterates his very existence. But when he enters the sanctuary of the world of divinity after annihilating his personality and ego, Satan loses all hope of seducing him. A general preceptor must be such as to have reached this stage. Otherwise, it is not safe for a devotee to submit himself to any Tom, Dick, or Harry. It is not advisable for a spiritual traveler to go at random to any shop for getting what he requires, or to submit himself to any pretender. He should make complete investigations about proposed preceptor, and when it is not possible to do so, he should put trust in Allah. Compare the proposed preceptor's teachings with those of the Holy Prophet and the Imams, and act only according to what conforms to the latter. If he does so, he will be safe from the wiles of Satan. The Quran says, "Satan has no power over those who believe and put trust in their Lord. His power is only over those who make a friend of him and those who ascribe partners to Allah." Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, verse 99. 22. Daily verbal recitations of liturgies. The amount and the method of the recitation of the verbal liturgies depend on what the preceptor advises. The liturgies are just like a medicine which may suit some and may not suit others. Sometimes it so happens that a spiritual traveler begins more than one liturgies of his own opinion, while one liturgy pulls him towards plurality and another towards unity. Their mutual clash nullifies the effect of both, and they become totally ineffective. It may be mentioned that the permission of the preceptor is necessary only for those liturgies which everybody is not allowed to recite. There is no objection to the reciting of those liturgies for which general permission already exists. The Gnostics do not attach any importance to the mere repetition of liturgies, without paying attention to their meaning, which is far more important. Mere verbal repetition is of no use. (23, 24, and 25). Remembrance, recollection, evil thoughts. These three stages are of great importance for the purpose of achieving the objective. Many people who fail to reach their destination either stop at one of these stages or go astray while on their way to them. The danger which these stages imply are idol worship, star worship, fire worship, and occasionally heresy. Pharaonism, claim of incarnation and identification with God, denial of being obligated to abide by religious injunctions, and regarding everything lawful. We will discuss briefly all these dangers. Let us first talk about incarnation and identification with God, which is the greatest danger and is caused by devilish insinuations when the mind is not free from evil thoughts. As the spiritual traveler is not out of the valley of ostentation, he may be led in the wake of manifestation of divine names or attributes to believe, God forbid, that Allah has dwelt in him. That is what is meant by incarnation, which amounts to infidelity and polytheism, while the belief in the unity of Allah nullifies every concept of pluralism and considers every existence in comparison to the existence of Allah a mere fantasy, and everything existing a mere shadow. When the spiritual traveler attains to this stage, he annihilates his existence and does not perceive anything existing except Allah. Eradication of devilish insinuations. The spiritual traveler must have full control over himself so that no thought might enter his mind inadvertently, and no action might be taken by him unintentionally. It is not very easy to secure the required degree of self-control, and that is why it is said that the eradication of insinuations is the best means of purifying the soul. When the spiritual traveler attains to this stage, he in the beginning finds himself overwhelmed by evil thoughts and devilish insinuations. Strange ideas come to his mind. He often thinks of old events which have already been forgotten, and visualizes imaginary events which are not possible ever to materialize. On this occasion the spiritual traveler must remain steadfast and firm, and should eradicate every noxious thought by means of remembering Allah. Whenever any evil thought may come to his mind, he should concentrate his attention on one of the names of Allah and should continue to do so till that thought has vanished. The best method of eradicating the evil thoughts is to concentrate on the divine names. The Quran says, "Whenever those who practice piety are troubled by an evil thought from Satan, they remember Allah, and then they forthwith see the light." Surah Al-A'raf, chapter 7, verse 201. However, the treatise ascribed to the late Bahrul Ulum does not allow this method to be adopted. This treatise lays stress on the necessity of banishing evil thoughts before beginning the acts of remembering Allah, and declares it to be extremely dangerous to use these acts for the eradication of evil thoughts and insinuations. We give below a summary of the arguments advanced by the treatise and propose to contradict them subsequently. This treatise says that many preceptors ask the devotees to do away with insinuations by means of remembering Allah. Obviously, here, remembering means mental concentration, not verbal recitation of any liturgy. But this method is very dangerous, for remembering Allah, in fact, amounts to beholding the real beloved, and to fix eyes on his beauty, which is not permissible unless eyes are shut to all others. For the sense of the dignity of the beloved does not allow the eye that sees him to see anyone or anything else. It will be a mockery to remove eye from the beloved again and again to see something, and a person who does that is likely to receive a shocking blow. The Quran says, "He who ignores the remembrance of the Beneficent, we assign to him a devil who becomes his comrade." Surah Az-Zukhruf, chapter 43, verse 36. Anyhow, there is one form of remembering Allah that is allowed for the purpose of getting rid of evil thoughts. According to this form, the devotee should not have the beauty of the beloved in mind. His purpose should be only to get rid of Satan, just like the man who calls his beloved only to dismay his rival and drive him away. Thus, if the devotee comes across any evil thought from which he finds it difficult to escape, he should engage himself in remembering Allah in order to get rid of that evil thought. Anyhow, the experienced Gnostics ask the beginners to clear away the evil thoughts first, and then to undertake the remembrance of Allah. For this purpose, they ask him to fix his eyes without blinking for some time on something like a piece of stone or wood, and concentrate his attention on it. If any evil thought came to his mind, he should chant the words Allah and La Mawjuda Illallah, and continue to chant them till he feels somewhat enraptured. While pursuing this course, he should chant a great deal Astaghfirullah, Ya Fa'alu, and Ya Basitu also. When he has attained to this stage, the devotee is allowed to resort to mental remembrance. If he wants so, in order to eradicate all evil thoughts once for all. For once the devotee has reached the stage of remembrance, recollection, and contemplation, the evil thoughts and the devilish insinuations disappear automatically. This was the summary of the discourse ascribed to Bahrul Ulum in the above-mentioned treatise. Anyhow, it must be understood that this method of the eradication of evil thoughts has been derived from the method followed by the Naqshbandi, a Sufi order found at some places in Turkey, etc. This order has come to be known so after the name of its grand preceptor, Khwaja Bahauddin Naqshbandi. But this is not a method approved by Akhund Mullah Hussein Quli Hamadani. Remembrance and recollection of Allah are an integral part of the method followed by him and his pupils also, but they lay greater emphasis on meditation and contemplation. We have already described meditation briefly, and now propose to mention some details of its various stages. First stage. The first stage of meditation is to abstain from everything unlawful and to perform everything obligatory. Any negligence or lethargy in this respect is not permissible. Second stage. The devotee should intensify his meditation and try to do all that he does purely for the sake of gaining good pleasure of Allah. He should carefully refrain from all that is called pastime and fun. Once this habit has become firmly established, it will no longer be necessary for him to exert himself in this regard. Third stage. He should believe and acknowledge that Allah is omniscient and omnipresent, and that Allah, who supervises all His creation, is looking at him. This meditation should be observed at all times and in all circumstances. Fourth stage. It is a higher degree of the third stage. At this point, the devotee himself perceives that Allah is omniscient and omnipresent. He sees the manifestations of the divine beauty. The Holy Prophet hinted at the third and the fourth stages of meditation when he said to his great companion, Abu Dhar Ghafari, "Worship Allah as if you were looking at Him, for if you do not see Him, He sees you." When the devotee attains to this stage, he should get rid of the evil thoughts by means of some acts of worship. The Islamic law does not allow concentration of thought on any piece of wood or stone. Suppose the devotee died while concentrating on a piece of wood or stone, what would be his answer to Allah? It is commendable from religious point of view to get rid of evil thoughts by the weapon of remembering and recollecting Allah, which itself is an act of worship. The best and the shortest way of getting rid of evil thoughts is to concentrate on one's self. This method is allowed and approved by Islam. The Quran says, "Believers, you have to take care of your own self. He who errs can do you no harm if you are rightly guided." Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 105. Concentration of thoughts on self is the method that was prescribed by Ahund Mullah Hussein Kuli, and has always been adopted by his pupils, who maintain that knowledge of self invariably leads to knowledge of Allah. The chain of the teachers of Gnosis goes back to Imam Ali. The number of the Sufi orders which have taken part in imparting the mystic knowledge is more than 100. But the main orders are not more than 25. All these orders go back to Imam Ali. Almost all of them belong to the Sunni denomination. Only 2 or 3 of them are Shiite. Some of these orders are traced back through Ma'ruf Karhi to Imam Ali Riza. But we belong to none of these orders and follow the directions of the late Ahund, who had nothing to do with these orders. More than 100 years ago, there lived in Shustar a leading scholar and Qazi judge named Agha Sayyid Ali Shustari. Like other eminent scholars, his occupation was teaching and administration of justice. Many people called on him to take counsel. One day, all of a sudden, somebody knocked at his door. When Agha Sayyid Ali opened it, he saw a weaver standing there. On inquiry as to what he wanted, he said, "The judgment given by you regarding the ownership of that particular property, on the basis of the evidence produced before you, was not correct. Actually, that property belongs to an orphan little child, and its deed is buried at such and such place. The course that is being followed by you is also wrong." Ayatollah Shustari said, "Do you mean to say that my judgment was wrong?" The weaver said, "What I have told you is the fact." After saying that, the weaver went away. The Ayatollah began to think over who that man was and what he said. On further inquiry it was found that the said deed was actually buried at the place mentioned by the weaver, and that the witnesses produced were liars. The Ayatollah was alarmed and said to himself, "My other judgments also might have been wrong." He was frightened. Next night the weaver again knocked at the door and said, "The course being followed by you is not proper." The same thing happened the third night. The weaver said, "Collect all your domestic effects and sell them out, and then set out for Najaf. Do as I have told you, and after 6 months wait for me in the Wadi Salam of Najaf." The late Shustari left for Najaf. As soon as he arrived he saw that the weaver in the Wadi Salam at sunrise, as if he had emerged suddenly from the ground. He gave some instructions and then disappeared once again. The late Shustari entered Najaf and began to act according to the weaver's instructions. At last he reached a position too high to be described. The late Sayyid Ali Shustari held Sheikh Murtaza Ansari in great respect, and attended his lectures on theology and jurisprudence. Sheikh Murtaza Ansari also attended Sayyid Ali's lectures on moral law once a week. Following Sheikh Murtaza Ansari's death, the late Sayyid Ali assumed his teaching functions and began to give lectures from where Sheikh Murtaza Ansari had suspended them. But he did not live long and died after 6 months only. Anyhow, during this short period, Sayyid Ali trained and guided Mullah Hussein Kuli, one of Sheikh Murtaza Ansari's distinguished pupils. Mullah Hussein Kuli already had some contact with Agha Sayyid Ali, and from time to time used to ask him questions regarding moral and spiritual matters. When Sayyid Ali succeeded Sheikh Murtaza Ansari, he sent a message to Mullah Hussein Kuli on which he wrote, "The course that you are following presently is faulty. Try to attain to higher positions." At last, Agha Sayyid Ali succeeded in persuading Mullah Hussein Kuli to follow his method. Consequently, before long Mullah Hussein Kuli became a wonder of his time in morals, spiritual knowledge and self-mortification. Mullah Hussein Kuli also trained some very distinguished and competent pupils, each of whom became a shining star on the sky of Gnosis. His most prominent pupils included Haji Mirza Javad Agha Maliki, Agha Sayyid Ahmed Karbala'i Tehrani, Agha Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id Habibi, and Haji Sheikh Muhammad Bahari. My preceptor was the late Haji Mirza Ali Agha Qazi, who was a pupil of Agha Sayyid Ahmad Karbala'i. This is the chain of my preceptors, which goes back to the above-mentioned weaver through the late Shustari. Anyhow, it is not known who that weaver was, and from where he acquired his Gnostic knowledge. My preceptor, Agha Qazi, followed the method of knowing self like Akhund Mullah Hussein Kuli, and for the eradication of evil thoughts and devilish insinuations, he called for paying attention to self first. He suggested that for this purpose the spiritual traveler should fix a time of day or night, and should concentrate his attention on self for half an hour or a little more. The daily practice will gradually invigorate his heart and eradicate the evil thoughts. At the same time, he will gradually acquire the knowledge of his soul, and, Allah willing, will achieve his objective. Most of those who succeed in clearing their mind from evil thoughts and ultimately receive the light of Gnostic knowledge achieve this objective in either of the following two ways. Either while reading the Quran, their mind is suddenly diverted to the reader, and it is revealed to them that the reader was really Allah. Or the veils are lifted through the intercession of Imam Abu Abdillah Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Holy Prophet of Islam, who is specially concerned with the lifting of veils and removing the barriers obstructing the way of the devotees. There are two things which are especially helpful in receiving the light of Gnostic knowledge. One, covering all the stages of meditation, and 2, concentrating attention on self. If the devotee paid full attention to secure these two things, he would gradually perceive that, despite its variety, the whole universe was being nurtured from one source that is the source of all that happens in the world. Whatever perfection, excellence, or beauty anything in the world possesses, it is a gift from that source. Everything has received a share of existence, beauty, and grandeur according to its capacity. The generosity of the Absolute Munificent is for all, but everything existing gets its share according to its capacity and nature. Anyway, if the spiritual traveler adheres to complete meditation and attention to self, 4 worlds will gradually be revealed to him. First world, unity of actions. In the beginning, the spiritual traveler will feel that he himself is the source of all that his tongue says. His ears hear, and his hands, feet, and other limbs do. He will think that he does whatever he likes. Later, he will feel that he himself is the source of all that happens in the world. At the next stage, he will feel that his existence is closely connected with Allah, and through this relationship, the favors and bounties of Allah reach the creation. Ultimately, he will perceive that Allah alone is the source of all actions and occurrences. Second world, unity of attributes. This world emerges after the first world. At this stage, when the spiritual traveler hears or sees anything, he feels that Allah is the source of his hearing and seeing. Later, he perceives that Allah is the source of all knowledge, power, life, hearing, and sight, found anywhere and in any form. Third world, unity of names. This world emerges after the second world. At this stage, the devotee feels that the divine attributes are not in any way separate from the divine essence. When he sees that Allah is the knower, he feels that his being knower is also Allah's being knower. Similarly, he thinks that his having power, his sight, and his hearing are Allah's having power, his sight, and his hearing. For he is sure that on principle there is only one being in the whole universe who is having power and who sees and hears. It is his power and his sight and his hearing that are reflected and indicated by everything existing according to its capacity. Fourth world, unity of being. This world is higher than the third world. It is revealed to the spiritual traveler in consequence to the revelation of the glory of divine essence. He, at this stage, perceives that there is only one being who is the source of all actions and attributes. At this stage, his attention remains concentrated on one being and is not drawn to his names and attributes. He attains to this stage only when he has annihilated his transient existence completely and has passed away in Allah. It would be difficult and far from truth even to call this stage the station of divine essence or divine unity, for the reality is far above any name that is uttered or written. No name can be given to the divine essence, and no station of it can be imagined. Allah is even above the question of not being imagined, for even negative expressions would mean that he has some limits, whereas he is above all limitations. When the spiritual traveler attains to this stage, he will have annihilated his self and ego completely. He will recognize neither himself nor anyone else. He will recognize Allah alone. While passing through each of these worlds, the spiritual traveler annihilates a part of his self and ultimately annihilates himself completely. In the first world, he attains to the stage of passing away, for he realizes that he is not the source of any of his doings, and that everything is from Allah. Thus, he annihilates the traces of his actions. In the second world, he, as the result of attributive manifestation, perceives that knowledge, power, and all such qualities exclusively belong to Allah. Then he effaces the signs of his own attributes. In the third world, the spiritual traveler receives the manifestation of divine names and perceives that Allah alone is the knower, the doer, etc. Thus, he effaces the signs of his names and designations also. In the fourth world, he views the manifestation of the glory of divine essence. As a result, he entirely loses his entity and feels that there exists nothing but Allah. The Gnostics call the revelation of the glory of divine essence at this stage the griffin which cannot be hunted. They use this word for the absolute being and mere existence, which is also described as the hidden treasure, and the being having no name nor any description. In his poems, Hafiz Shirazi has described this point in an attractive style, using beautiful metaphors. At one place he says, "An old seer and sage told me the following story, which I shall never forget. One day a pious man was going somewhere. On his way he saw a drunkard sitting, who said, 'Devotee, if you have some bait to offer, lay down your trap here.' The devotee said, 'I have a trap, but I want to catch a griffin.' The drunkard said, 'You can catch it only if you know where it is to be found, but its nest is not known.' 'That's right,' said the devotee. 'But to be disappointed is a worse calamity. Just see how this man did not lose heart.' It is possible that the lonely man is led to the peerless being by a divinely appointed guide. Obviously, it is not possible to catch the griffin when its nest is not known, but Allah can bestow his favor on the lovers of his everlasting beauty, and can lead them to the world of divine unity and passing away from self.